Witty, thought-provoking, and uplifting, Southern Soul live stream is a program that you'll invite your friends over to watch every week, where you'll learn about interesting guests and get to share in their fascinating experiences. Tune in each Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to connect with guests from across the generations and to laugh with our eclectic hosts who are as charming as they are talented. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's our host, Calvin.
With our first speaker on the topic of not only just mother wound or mother-daughter conflict, but more specifically, mental health.
Absolutely.
And let's see, I want to read part of this bio. Actually, I'm not going to read the bio. You know what? Anyway, Miss Tiara, if you don't mind, let's see if we get you unmuted. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about you, because I don't want to read the bio, and just tell us about you, where you're from, and, a few things about you.
Absolutely. So I am Tiara Nicole Riley. I am a life coach, motivational speaker, 4-time published author, the owner of Rethinking Me LLC, which is a life coaching firm. And my favorite title in the whole wide world, I am Kayla's mama. Okay. So that is a good synopsis of who I am. I've been in my company for a good amount of time, almost a decade at this point. I'm a second generation entrepreneur, so it's in my blood, it's in my DNA, it's what I do at this point. But I'm really excited to be here to talk about mental health. Not only do I have my own challenges with mental health, but I'm a mental health advocate. I'm a big fan of therapy, and I will always recommend it where appropriate. But I think it's something that we, especially in the Black community, need to remove the stigma with, because it's absolutely a resource. And I need Jesus and my therapist. Okay. It's not an and or. It's not an or, it's and, right? I need to go to church. I need to pray. And I need to sit with a licensed therapist who's trained in actually, creating patterns and action plans and things like that. And what I identify is God made therapists for a reason. So here I am, utilizing the tools that he gave us to live our best lives.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I love a person who has passion for therapy. I'll tell you why. Is whenever you talk to people, you can tell there's different types. There are the people who be like, well, I don't know. And the people who like, well, I don't know. And then you got the people who they'll be talking and laughing at the same time because they know it's real, right? When you can laugh about some of this stuff, I tell people, a part of my healing process has been when I get to the point where I can kind of laugh about it, then it may not be over, but there's definitely some healing now. I found your bio, so I'm a little bit ready now because that trivia had you going. I want to just read a little bit of this because I actually loved it when I read it originally, and it gave me a backdrop of you. So and I'll make sure I'm getting your name correct. Tiara, right? Okay, cool. So raised by a single mother, Tiara Nicole Riley has seen her share of struggles. She is a survivor of depression, attempted suicide, miscarriage, and daddy issues. She has now dedicated her life to motivating others to do the same. Through books, blogs, video streaming, developmental coaching programs, workshops, and motivational speaker, Tiara persistently encourages consistent self-growth and accountability to others. Southern Soul, welcome to Tiara. Tiara, tell me this. Tell me your origin story. I happen to know you published your first book at what, 18, 20 or something?
No.
Like, how old were you for your first book?
So my first book is called 23 and Finally Loving Me. I wrote it at 23. I published it when I was 26, 27, somewhere around there. But yes, that is when I wrote the book. So the first book actually started as a journaling experience. Journaling is very therapeutic for me. And on my 23rd birthday, I decided to dedicate a year to growth, healing, development. And I just journaled the process. And that was all it was supposed to be. But I tried to be obedient to what I feel God telling me to do. Right. And so one day I felt him tell me, like, you need to type it. Because it was just a journal. Right. He's like, you need to type it. okay, so go through the process of typing it. And the thing that I've in my walk with God is that I realize is you may not know why you're asked to do certain things. You just got to do it. Like that's what faith is. You just do it. And so, not even a week or two after I had finished typing up the book, I was in a church group, and one of the members mentioned that her daughter had attempted suicide. And she was like, just pray for us. I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. As her mother, I don't know how to support her. And so afterwards, I went up to her. I said, I struggled with suicide myself. If there's anything that I could do to support you guys, like, let me know. About a week later, she called and said her daughter had been date raped, and it re-triggered her suicidal attempt or thoughts and ideations. And she ended up getting hospitalized over it as well. And in that moment, I was able to talk to her. I didn't know her daughter, but I was able to say, when your daughter is going through this, maybe this is what she needs. Maybe you can try this. This is what I wish my mother knew, and I couldn't tell her in the moment. Like, these are questions that you can ask to figure out what she specifically might need. And it was the first time I felt grateful for my experiences with depression and suicide. And my first attempt, I was 7 years old. So kids struggle, right? But I didn't know how to verbalize that. I didn't know how to communicate that. And I was able, because it was already typed and because I was obedient, right? I was able to share with her a digital copy of the book. And that is what prompted me to actually publish it, because I realized, like, my story can help somebody who's going through daddy issues, who's going through low self-esteem, who's going through depression or suicide. And in my later books, I talk about my struggles with miscarriage and grief, and just being able to use the things that I've been through to help the next person.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I've always had a special, I don't know, warm place of pride or excitement for people who have that ability to write the thoughts, those feelings in that channel. It's like a gift.
Yeah.
It's like music, it's like writing. And I can only imagine, like you said, it's therapeutic for you. I can
Yeah.
only imagine how that first book, but then you continue to
Yeah.
continue to write books. Like, why did you continue to write books at this time? I mean, was it something else calling you? Why did you continue? Tell us about your other books and why did you
Yeah.
continue to publish?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, I always try to be obedient to what I feel God telling me to do. And I remember at my first book release party, I don't know where it came from. It wasn't planned, but I was like, I'm going to publish a book every year. And that's what I did for the first 4 years. That's exactly what I did. And another thing that I think gets missed is obedience in doing things, but also obedience when you no longer feel God telling you to do a thing. Right. So for 4 years straight, I published a book every calendar year. Book, book, book. My first 4 were out. And when it got time for book number 5, I just didn't feel that pushed. I didn't know. I have several books that are already completed. But it was like, none of them felt right. None of them felt like it was time. And so now here I am. I'm actually in the book number 4 finished in 2020. And so now I'm actually in the process of publishing book number 5 in 2023, but it feels right. It's the right time. It's the right story. It's exactly what I feel led to talk about in this season of my life.
Thanks for sharing that. It
Yeah.
sounds like, for me, I do podcasting. It's my channel. I would read like tons of books and, tons of conversations. And for many years, I couldn't figure out how to channel that energy. But
Yeah.
it just kind of almost sounds like a part of your mental health journey is writing and publishing is supporting your mental health. I mean, is it therapeutic for you? I mean, does it help you like think through problems or does it slow you down? I mean, what is writing? What does it do for you?
Yeah, writing is so therapeutic for me. So a part of my self-care mental health routine is I journal every morning, clockwork. Like every morning, I have my journal. So that's completely separate. But as far as actually publishing the books, what it does for my mental health journey is it feels really good to help people with my story. And like you said, it is a gift. And to be able to take my experiences and package it in a way that it actually helps people is something not everyone can do organically. I think everybody can tell their story, but to be able to do it in a way that it flows, that it doesn't, it's my story, but it doesn't, it's able to interact with other people, and people are able to gather different parts of what is my story and resonate with the part that's meant for them. I think it's my God-given gift, honestly. And I remember my mom pulled out a book that my first official book that was published in like kindergarten. And I was like, oh my God. Or maybe not kindergarten. It might have been like first or second grade, but I read it recently and I was like, first of all, this is cute, but it just reminded me that this is my calling on my life. And to see those breadcrumbs throughout, seeing the first actual book that I published, right? And then to see, that I've been journaling for a very, very long time and where that took me. And so it's just really, really great. And one of the intrinsic rewards of being obedient to God's call on your life is it feels good. And you just keep doing it, as long as it feels right, I'm going to keep doing it.
I love how you described when you helped that lady at church. It was the
Yeah.
first time you had this different feeling, almost a good feeling, right?
Yeah.
About your story. And I can only
Yeah.
imagine how beautiful that is. Women's empowerment is something that you're proud of.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me,
Absolutely.
what does it mean to you, and how does this influence the work that you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I love, 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 love speaking to women. I think women are the backbone of society. And if I'm getting specific, Black women are the backbone to society. And we are the backbones in our families. We're the backbones at work. We're the backbones in society, pushing forward issues and challenging the norms and fighting for everybody's rights, right? And so I think if you empower the woman, especially if you empower the Black woman, that's where the real change begins. And it's just so beautiful to be able to pour into people who are constantly pouring into others. And I think that's why I love, love, love speaking to Black women, because we're givers. We're giving and giving and giving and giving. And far too often, we don't pause to give to ourselves, let alone are we accustomed to receiving. So much so we feel guilty for leaning on others. We feel like everyone can lean on me, and we have this Black superwoman complex. And the more people I can help take that cape off, the better. Because
Awesome.
that is not rewarding. Being superwoman is not rewarding under any context. The world will continue to spin if you take a day off.
Awesome. One of the things that I'm proud of is to see the next generation and how they begin to position themselves as entrepreneurs. In fact, in 2 Thursdays from now, we're going to have a Generation Z panel. I think you may
Oh,
be
no,
uh,
I am millennial.
you millennial. Okay, yeah,
I am
I can
millennial
never
through and
tell.
through.
You get to the point you just can't tell. But one of the things that I can appreciate is that this embracing entrepreneurship, this embracing
Yeah.
challenging
Yeah.
your own way, your own path, and things like that. Tell me this, when it comes to, engaging with you, I know Tamika's going to share your information so people can follow you, but,
Thank you, Tamika.
how do people typically engage you? Like if they're looking for support, what type of, if you don't mind just describing what type of typical scenario, like you do coaching, you do life coaching, like do you do free consultations? Like how would the audience follow
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So I do offer free consultations. If you are ready for a life coach, absolutely. Thank you, Tamika, for putting the website in there, rethinkingmellc.com. You can set up a free consultation. And the reason I offer it for free is because I want to make sure it's right for you and right for me. I want to feel excited about your story. I want to feel capable of helping you. And all the fun things. And so that's why I do the free consultations. I also have library full of digital content and event replays. My books are there, my shirts are there. So you can engage in those ways as well. I am most active on TikTok. Every day I'm posting motivational inspiration and messages and things like that. I'm on all social media platforms at Tiara Nicole Riley, but I have the most fun on TikTok. So that's where I am.
Awesome. I'm so jealous. I have a lot of fun on TikTok, but I just so struggle. Eventually, I'm gonna find my TikTok groove, and when I do,
Yeah.
everybody gonna know about it. I'm gonna be on
And
there.
that's the thing. I literally, when I first started, I was like, my sister is Gen Z because
Okay.
we're 10 years apart. So she is a Gen Zer through and through. And I'm like, I feel like a geriatric millennial. I don't know what I'm doing. And eventually I figured out my groove. And there are some parts of TikTok that I'm like, nope, won't be
Yeah.
trying that trend. But once you figure out how it works, it's a blast. It's a blast.
Yes,
And
indeed.
it's so simple. You just, it's easy to spend a lot of time on TikTok. I literally have to set limits for myself on how much time I'm spending on TikTok. I'm like, okay, it's 8:32 now. I'm gonna give myself until 8:45, and then I have to get up.
Yes, yes, and I'm claiming it. I finally figured it out, and I'm calling it the
Yeah,
groove. And it's like, hey, don't rush it. Just gotta find your groove. And
yeah.
when you find your groove, then you'll
It's
have a
fun.
good time. So I'm
It's
I'm
a
just
blast.
gonna walk into it. When I do, I'm gonna be talking about it every week. I'm like, I found my TikTok.
Yes, yes, yes,
But
yes. I
Tia,
love
thank
it.
you for being here today. I like to kind of spotlight, entrepreneurs. I like to spotlight other people in the community. And we're doing something different this year of really just making sure that any entrepreneur out there who are doing their thing, we are creating this unique segment where we just spend time, let you talk about you in your life. And hopefully you'll come back in Southern Soul and maybe, co-host some shows with us and just have a
Yeah,
good time. I know you were podcasting
absolutely.
for a while. It's a lot of work. And I tell people it's a lot of work. That's why you got to
Yeah.
get support. Southern Soul. Tamika gonna drop y'all in the chat if y'all want to get support with your podcast. Because I typically tell people is that when you get started, the first episode, second episode, but after that, you'll be like, wait a minute, this is a lot of work. I got
It
to do this
is.
every week.
It
And that's
is.
where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
So, hopefully you'll come on back and, I got some, I think we're probably going to be doing maybe a mental health show, maybe once a
Oh,
month, I'm thinking. And if not once a month, once every 6 weeks. So I got a big one coming up in, I think, April. So I'm going to reach out to you on that one.
yeah. Just email me the dates. I'd love to participate. This is a great platform. Music speaks to my soul as well. I feel like I was a singer in a past life. The voice just didn't carry over into this life, the talent didn't transfer over. But so I love music. It's my heartbeat. So I enjoy the platform. And thank you so much for having me. And I'd love to be back, but agreed, like doing a podcast is work. It
It
is
is a
work.
lot of
And
work.
that's probably why I don't do it anymore.
It's a lot of work. Well, hang tight, and if you guys
Yeah,
got questions for Tiara, you can hit up in the chat. She'll hang
please,
around. She
please.
may be able to stay to Q&A
Yeah.
after we do Dr. Shawn, but if not, make sure you hit up in the chat, get her information, chat with her, and make sure you follow up with her.
Okay.
So next up is Dr. Shawn. How you doing, girl? How you doing, Dr. Shawn?
Hey,
I am so excited that you're here. This topic of mother wound is a topic that was foreign to me for some time.
mhm.
But you and I sit down and we kind of had our conversation, and I always trust the process. I trust the process. And I remember we were talking for a while, and then I just kept talking and kept talking. And you're like, Calvin, that's my thing. I'm like, what's your thing? The thing you just said, that's my thing. And I'm like, what thing? And you're like, mother wound is my thing. And I didn't even know what it was at the time, right?
Mhm.
All I knew is that I'm really big into the culture. I'm really big in the community, and I can, I'm that empath. I can feel the pain, right? And I was feeling this pain out there, and I couldn't really describe it. But as you and I were talking, the topic of mother wound came up, and that's how we ended up here tonight. But before we jump into you, I just want to you have a short bio, so I want to read it a little bit just to kind of tell people about you. Dr. Shawn, the LPC, has almost 20 years working with women in Michigan and now serving women in Georgia. She specializes in unearthing generational trauma. She has studied African American women and the mother-daughter relationship and how it has worked or not worked for ages. Dr. Shawn has seen results with evidence-based treatment, but quickly learned that millennial women also needed a safe place to discuss their concerns and fears. She is not only a mental health advocate, but a wife, a mother, a sister, and a friend. Dr. Shawn, the LPC. What's up, girl? How you doing?
Hello, 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 hello.
Well, I'm excited to kind of just, chat with you about the topic. But before we do, let's just step into your origin story. The audience, they kind of like to get to know the speaker. Tell us a little bit about you, your origin story, where you're from, where you grew up, and how you got into this work.
Okay. So I always like to start with my name is Richarne Fuqua, and named after my father, Richard. And I also want to show love to my mom, Eunice. And a lot of times with the topic of mother wound and dealing with your family of origin, sometimes people think, what's going on there. But I do want to give love to my parents. I'm also Fuqua, so I want to give love to my husband. He gave me that name and such a wonderful support for what I do. And I am a girl from Detroit, from the east side of Detroit. I don't know if we have any. I did see somebody from Champaign, Illinois. So Midwest, Detroit, East, West. I'm from the east side, grew up, and I moved to the Georgia Metro Atlanta area a few years ago. And just having a heart for people always from a very early age, and having people at the house when we were playing the music that took me back, basement parties, card parties, rent parties, those kind of things, just loving and taking care of people. And the path led me to want to know how to do this for real. That is how I got on my mental health journey for myself personally, but also as an educator and a therapist to help people have hope, to help people know healing is possible and let people show up authentically as whoever they need to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we've had a few shows about generational trauma and habits, but, for the people who, maybe used to these, because certain words have different meaning depending on where you go. Like, if you don't mind, let's just, we'll get us warmed up here. What is, generational trauma? What is generational habit? What is that all about?
Okay. So when we talk about generational trauma, a lot of times I like to say it didn't start with you. The things that you are experiencing, the things that have you have the beliefs that you have or got you to where you are. A lot of times it didn't start with you. It started from your family of origin. And sometimes you call that the micro. And then there's the meso, there's the community. It could be a church influence, your neighborhood, even your ethnicity. And then there is the macro influence. And so what we know is like all of those have some type of impact on who we are. When we talk about generational trauma, what we know is this goes back at least 3 generations, and especially for the female child. If you have a child, you're passing 3 generations down to your female child because they get all the eggs. And so there's a term for that. Transgenerational epigenetics inheritance. That's the technical name. I just shorten it and call it, generational stuff, generational baggage. Sometimes in church you hear generational trauma, but that's what that means. It's not just your stuff that you're dealing with. You're dealing with stuff from the past.
I love a good academic term, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that one because that was about 6 syllables, but I do know. I love when you can find academic research in formal time spent on understanding these things, the things that we just, may casually call a generational trauma. We may casually call, as some say, a generational habit, but to know that there's actual research behind it. So as I began to kind of step into, I was researching for the show, it's like my eyes were just opening and I'm looking at this topic of mother wound. I'm like, it's just so much to unpack there. It's almost like mother wound is a type of generational habit trauma. I mean, would you consider that? Explain to us, what is mother wound? What is that all about?
So yes, actually, yes, a mother wound is a type of generational trauma. And it was something that I learned. I heard of epigenetics. And so epigenetics is the genetic part of what your experience passed down. When we talk about a mother wound, well, let me go back to epigenetics for a minute, just to give people the understanding. So when I say you can pass it down, your cells are round, okay? DNA, they round. If you remember, biology class, science class. But what we learned is that if you have had stress and trauma, that stretches and pulls and reshapes them. And that's what gets passed down. And that's the epigenetic part. When we talk about the mother wound, and Black women specifically, which is where I found my interest, Black women have always worked in this country. We've always labored. And either Tiara even talked about it when she said, we're always giving and doing. And when we pass that on, it does something to us. And we've named it mother wound because a lot of times a daughter or children in particular can feel abandoned. They can feel rejected. They can feel like they cannot be themselves, maybe because there was this rigidness. But a lot of times the mother doesn't even realize this kind of thing has been passed on. We're just trying to make sure our children are strong and can navigate in society. But we don't know that we are leaving them underprepared and with an hurt that is open, that's often not healed if you don't know what's going on.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to kind of, I'm going to shift around. I was thinking millennials, but I'm going to pause on that because I really want to kind of dig into this a little bit more. As I began to kind of think about this, I kept thinking, wait a minute. I can imagine there are people out there who may have this challenge, yet they would think, well, I had a good relationship with my mom, or, hey, me and my mom are cool. Have you seen patients who supposedly have good relationships with their mother, but still have these mother wound type of dynamics in play?
Absolutely. So let's go there. For Black families, the mother is the pinnacle, mother, grandmother, the matriarch. She's guiding us, she's carrying us, and we talked about that. So if it isn't a tenuous relationship or a relationship with a lot of conflict, it's hard to see that there has been a wound left. You mentioned millennial women, which is initially what I began to work on when I started studying about mother-daughter relationships. But what we were finding is that when we started digging, like maybe mom was too rigid, or maybe she pushed too hard. Maybe you were treated differently than your brother. And it's like, whoa, we start digging, stuff starts coming up. Well, I didn't feel like I got the nurturing that I needed. And then that's how we kind of get into the conversation, or what we know now as healing the mother wound.
Awesome. Yes. It seems like I like the generational thing. Me and my buddies, we tend to talk about the generational nuances, meaning there come a time where one generation just does things just a little different, right? So let's say, hey, I'm hypothetically speaking, mom was a traditional, woman, right? She worked at home. She worked from home. She took care of the kids. She took care of the family. She sacrificed over and over again. Yet the daughter is somewhat different. Maybe she's a leader in the community. Maybe she's, a CEO. Maybe she's an executive. Maybe she does things differently. Is that enough to create some sort of conflict between mom and daughter to kind of lead to some sort of conflict there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so many layers and so little time, Calvin, so many layers in so little time. Because even when you hear that, it seems like that something like that should be good, right? You should be proud of her. But does that same CEO feel like she has time for herself and to take off her cape? We just talked about that. And I'm glad my daughter is doing things and being a leader in the community, but a lot of times there's still that push that you still have to do that. You have to take care of your children. You have to take care of your home. If you have a spouse, you need to take care of your spouse, and you better not embarrass us at work. So there's still this thing that the I won't say millennial woman or the woman in the next generation is carrying and trying to fit, and it can cause conflict and self-concept issues.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I like the way you describe it, is that it should be a good thing, right? I mean, it is a good thing, right? But just because it's a good thing doesn't mean that it doesn't cause that. I like that term conflict, right? And just, not good, not bad, but just a little conflict. And, as I begin to read on the topic, I was just amazed when I, was looking at some of the challenges, like feeling, that you must remain small. I mean, that just sounds horrible. Or being overly rigid or dominating. I'm like, Or unconsciously waiting for approval. And I just begin to think, and it's like you said, it's like an onion. You begin to unpack it, and I was like, how does this even manifest, right? But let's not go too deep there because there's a lot there. Tell us about you and your therapeutic style, right? You're working with, you got to focus on millennial women. I think you see women in Texas. I mean, not Texas, Georgia and Michigan.
Georgia and Michigan.
Georgia and Michigan, right? And tell us about your therapeutic style. Like, what's your approach? And whenever you run into or encounter, women that are willing to work with you.
So my therapeutic style, I like to say, is that we're sitting in the living room or sitting at your kitchen table, just having a conversation before it gets deep. And what that means is I'm going to bring in evidence, but first I have to make sure you feel heard. So no topic is off the table. It's a non-judgment, is free. No judgment. Whatever you think, feel, or say, we're trying to figure out, where did that come from? What is that attached to? And then we can go into some of the therapeutic interventions that deal with trauma, like EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a intervention that is used to help process trauma without you having to go into the detail of the trauma. There's acceptance and commitment therapy that helps you deal with the emotional part that maybe you have not processed the emotion that's attached to an experience. And so those are some of the technical terms. But before we get into that, how you doing? How you feel? How was your day? That's the kind of way that we're going to start out the conversation.
I can definitely appreciate that. I was speaking to someone recently about different types of therapy, and the most significant part is being seen. And the challenge of what happens when you have a therapist, and let's say they're from a different culture or a different experience, and for some reason, they just don't see you, right? They don't connect with you. They don't understand. That's one thing as I was reading your bio, I kind of, appreciate as a mother, as a daughter, right? As a friend, that you can begin to notice some of these nuances and, make those connections. Let's see here. I guess I would like to know, this seems like such a hard topic because I don't think a person comes to you and be like, okay, I got mother wound issues. Can you help me? Like, how do they show up, and how, like, for the women in the audience, how would they even know if this is a topic that they should pull into? Is there anything that they would be feeling or considering? Like, what would be a good start to kind of think about this topic? Obviously they're here because they're curious, but how would they know, right? Because it seems like it's such I don't know if it's a new topic, but it's almost be hard to kind of know if you needed help. I don't know. That's my observation.
Okay, so that's a very good question. And to be honest, I've worked with in therapy for almost 20 years. You shared that, and it wasn't something that I necessarily pulled out, but in therapy, one of my goals was always get to the root. And you even say in the podcast, look, what's your origin story? And that's how we would start. Like, what's your origin story? Tell me where you came from, and certain things will come up, be like, I want to explore that further and go a little bit deeper. And then that's kind of what connected me to kind of do research on it. So people don't necessarily come in. What I'm seeing people come in with is usually depression, anxiety, or some type of trauma, some type of event, somebody died, and why am I still grieving, that kind of thing. Or I want to strangle my boss at work. Why do I want to strangle my boss at work? I don't think I like my husband. That's the kind of stuff people come in and talk about. And then when we start peeling the onion, a lot of times I feel like I had to get married, because I had kids, or I feel like, I have to do this because, I got this degree and I'm supposed to be, showing up at work, or I might be the one, what I call the few and the only Black woman at work. And I need to, I got to stay here and do this. And so a lot of times she's coming in for something else. The way that you begin to experience, to say, is this a other one that I need to examine, is just, what is your origin story? How do you feel when you think about your self-concept and your self-reflection? How much of yourself do you see in your mother?
Yes. I like that one, because that one goes deep, and it requires a certain level of introspection. That is awesome. Let's get ready to transition for some questions. But what I want to talk about is, how do the audience connect with you? Tamika's going to drop in the chat your connection information. Okay. Do you do what type of patients? I mean, I think you standard patients, but they would have to be in Georgia or Michigan. And what if, someone's listening and they feel a need to, reach out to a therapist elsewhere? Can they contact you for that, and then you redirect them? How does that work?
So the best way to contact me, and I thank you for putting my information in the chat. Yes, if you're looking for a therapist, if you're looking for someone to do mental health therapy, they do need to be licensed in your state. So that's the first thing. But what I do try to do, if you follow me on social media, which is at Dr. Shawn, the THELPC, which is licensed professional counselor, I try to provide resources. I'm providing information. I'm on TikTok too. It's fun. You got to come and join us there. But I'm trying to put content out. If people do reach me, I usually use Psychology Today first, which is psychologytoday.com as the largest database. You can put in by your insurance. You can put in by gender. You can put in by ethnicity to find a therapist there. I also recommend clinicians of color, therapy for Black girls. There's therapy for Black men. So, where we can find someone based upon what our need is, or if you're looking for someone who looks like you. There's also for the LGBTQ community. There's resources for, people that you feel like I can just come and be myself, because to me, that's the first thing. You need some place where you can be comfortable if you're going to go down the road to seek therapy. But to answer your question, because that's the long answer, follow me on social media is the best way, because I'm providing resources and I'm working on something so I can reach out to more women who are just not in my state.
Yes. No, the research, right? We're going to make sure we share that in the chat. Tamika, if you don't mind sharing in the chat, the research, tell us about the research, because we're going to share that in the chat. So for the audience, as Dr. Shawn is actually conducting some research, and tell us about it, because I don't want to butcher it, about I think the Black women with depression and anxiety research. Tell us about that.
So right now I'm collecting information on what I'm calling the Black woman stress inventory, because during this, in my work and just, being a mental health advocate, I'm wondering, do we handle stress differently? And I believe we do, but you got to push everything through research. So the inventory is, and it's real quick, please, I need to hear from you women, yes or no questions, just to see the things that we have dealt with in the last 2 years. So for instance, I'm gonna throw out hair. Nobody else has an issue with hair like Black women. And it can really be a stressful thing depending on where you work or how your hair agrees with you after it gets wet or humid. So that, so that's what I'm looking at. I'm saying, well, how do we carry our stress, and what are the things that we have to deal with? So when you're dealing with mental health practitioners, we can be looked at better and holistically.
Awesome. I love. I'm a big fan of natural hair. And one of the things I love about the natural hair movement is that it essentially began to enable us with something that was so unique to us, like our fingerprints, our hair, right? A wise person once says that, our people are the only people who have been critiqued or criticized by the way hair naturally grows out of our hair,
Ouch.
out of our head, and how that creates a certain stress. So I already know that research point is true, is that we got all kinds of stress associated with that. We are actually have a few questions in the audience, and and I'm loving the questions. So as we transition to Q&A, continue to put your questions in the chat. And I see Dr. Rhonda Maddox is here. Thank you, Dr. Rhonda, for being here. I'm going to have to get you scheduled because we're going to have a lot to talk about. So Tamika, the first question I see comes from Dr. Rhonda Maddox, and I'm going to read her question first because it's the first one I see. But if you could help me kind of transition, and Tiara, if you don't mind joining us back for Q&A, we'll kind of talk a little bit. Let's see here. Let me add Tiara to the screen for the Q&A. So any questions you have for either speaker, I'm going to start with Dr. Maddox and Tamika, if you don't mind helping me kind of stay on top of these questions. For everyone else, if you can just continue to add your questions to the chat. Dr. Maddox says, how extensive does it have to be, your situation, before you could label it a mother wound?
That's a good question. The label, let's start with there. I try to let people give that to themselves. I do not label people. I don't even like using depression and anxiety, if we're going to keep it real. That's your body's response to something else that's going on. So we just kind of talk from, what it is. And if it's something that comes up, I actually recommend there's a book where they can go and the book is Mother Hunger by Kelly McDaniel, where you can go and kind of see, does this fit? And then we'll come back and discuss it. And I say, do you have questions? Do you see parts in you? And the book usually resonates and brings up stuff for them to be able to say, I think I have a mother wound. So yeah, I try not to put labels on people.
Yes. I actually purchased that book. That is an awesome book. So thank you for referring that. I love a good book. So Tamika, if you don't mind helping us put that book in the chat, you can get it on
I love a good book too. So but I use Audible because life, but I'm adding it to my wish list now.
Yes. Yeah, she has an Audible book as well.
Yes. Tiara was actually in the chat as well. She says, waiting for my mother's approval is something I'm still unpacking. I love that statement because, we didn't talk much on it, but as I begin to read on it, I was like, I mean, I know parent approval is important, but I begin to realize. Oh, Tamika muted me again. Welcome back. Hey, how important mother approval is when, once again, you're different, right? Let's say mom's traditional.
Yeah.
And you're the CEO, right? And, it's like she goes left, you go, and whatever. So that.
And in my experience,
go ahead, Tiara.
My mother is, I said earlier, I'm second generation entrepreneur. So my mother is the entrepreneur. My family is full of them, but my mother is who I'm referring to. But the ways in which I'm different is I speak about, acknowledge and openly talk about my mental health challenges, my emotional needs, all of these. So I've become like almost a black sheep, but I'm okay with it. Like my family is very much on the don't ask, don't tell, don't put your business in the streets. And my first book might as well be a tell-all. Like my family was at the book release like,
ooh,
you put that on paper? And I'm like, well, it's out there.
Hey.
So, that different piece often comes in from like, I'm very open about what I go through, and my family collectively feels like I'm too open, and I'm just like, well, what you gonna do about it?
Wow. There's a statement in the chat. This is from Jocelyn. Thank you, Dr. Shawn, for illustrating that mother wounds are personal and defined a lot of times by our needs and what we did not get from our mother, as well as the expectation they put on us and what we feel they have for us. Let's see here. Tamika, you got another question because the chat is out of control. I can't really keep up with it. Do you got a next question for me, Tamika?
Actually, there's just been more statements in here, but there is one from Joe P. What is the youngest client that you work with, Dr. Shawn?
So currently I work with women over 18. In the past, I worked with clients as young as 5. And so if you are looking for someone, there are people out there that do work with young children, even as young as 3. A lot of times in 3, we're doing play therapy. But now I've kind of narrowed it, and you have to be over 18. And I will say that became, because of the pandemic and using the screen stuff, is where I decided to just kind of move away from that.
Awesome, awesome. But yeah, I think as you were saying earlier, if he hits you up on I think TikTok, your preferred, platform, then, maybe you'll give him some references for where he's at, right? Because I'm sure the references are different. Let's see here. Miss Edmonds says, this is all so vivid for me. My relationship with mom is loving, yet also triggering. I love those honest moments. I love the statement a wise person said, you can't heal what you don't reveal. Tiara knows that quite well. Family, we talk about everything. So some people do and some people hide it. But for me, it's all about the healing. And, I think for certain places, talking about mom topics can be taboo. I think it's, in my world, it's always been easier to talk about dad issues than it is to talk about mom issues. But the fact that the people are brave to be able to just call it what it is, I know there's healing on the other side.
And
Let's see. Go ahead, Tiara.
I was going to say, I think part of the challenge with what leads to the tabooism is there's this inner turmoil. So I resonate as well. Like, I had a great mom, but also we had some issues, you know what I mean? And so because I think it's easier to talk about daddy issues because stereotypically speaking, it's the mother who's there day to day.
Correct.
If I'm with one parent, it's more likely that I was with the mother at a minimum Monday through Friday. You see what I'm saying? And so in order to acknowledge that I have mother wounds, like for me, a lot of my daddy issues were rooted in his inconsistency. How can I then look at the parent who never missed anything and then say it still wasn't enough? You see what I'm saying?
Wow.
And so for me, growing up, I didn't even acknowledge that I had mother wounds until I was in my mid-20s. And it was because I couldn't handle having 2 not good enough parents. Like, my brain couldn't process, especially as a child, that I don't have enough when it comes to parenting. And again, my mother's a good mother, but also because she was in single mother, super Black woman, because she was in being both parents, and she was a single mother to 2, and she was a full-time entrepreneur, and she was just trying to make it all work, I didn't get the emotional care that I needed and that I might have gotten from her if she had a partner to support her. Do you see what I'm saying? Awesome. And so it's a result of the circumstances. So not necessarily a fault issue, but it takes a lot of courage to be able to say the parent who showed up every day still wasn't enough.
Wow. There's a lot of unpacking there. And, I got a question for you guys as I read another chat. I'm going to actually do the question. I'm going to read some chat. Is it possible, and I'm just throwing this out there, Dr. Shawn, I already know the answer, but I'm just going to throw it out there. It's not too bad of a curveball. Is it possible for sons to have mother wounds?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even with the book, she starts out in the book like, yes, men, mother wounds happen there too. It shows up differently in us. That's all. Absolutely. And I want to add to, let people understand this is not by any means to bash a mother or a single mother. I've spent a majority of my children's years as a single mother. So that, and I want people to understand that. And even when I'm in therapy, I'm like, this is not about bashing your mother. Because one, she was doing the best she could, even if she wasn't that great. Because some people are like, well, listen, this wasn't given to us. We try to take whatever we have and make the best out of it and move on. Remember, I mentioned micro, meso, and macro. Some of this, we, as Black people, we're trying to navigate. we had a lot of institutional racism. We also have social economic things that you're trying to navigate. Sometimes, so it's not just one thing. When we talk about the mother womb, the reason why I decided to focus on it, because it is a significant relationship. It is your origin story, whether you know her or not. And so, given a chance to understand, like, she had some stuff that she had to deal with. So she can only give you what she has. And so I say that if you got a dozen of eggs, and if it's only 2 eggs left in the car, she's giving you the 2 eggs, but I really needed a dozen. So she's doing the best she can. The thing about you, and I appreciate your story, Tiara, that she's like, I need to change this. I need to change this for me. I need to change this for the next generation. I need to change it for her sister. Just because of her doing the work, she's changing 7 generations. I told you she's changing, because it's going to, how they talk about mental health. If you breathe, you have mental health. If you feel, you have mental health. And just by her doing that, she's able to change the next 7 generations behind her.
Thank you for saying that. And I think me and my mother recently had to have a tough conversation. And I had to explain to her, I was like, when it comes to finances, education, career opportunities, you expect me to do better than you because I'm the next generation. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to mental health, emotional well-being, parenting, you get offended when I try to do better than you. And I had to explain to her, I said, for me, I am able to be a better mother because you were a better mother than your mother. Correct. And then she was a better mother than her mother. Like, it's all Correct. About improvement overall, but you can't take offense to me improving in one category, but then expect me to improve in the other category. Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to be better than the previous generation so that the next generation can be better. And the next, and I think that was a really freeing conversation.
Awesome.
Because I think when I talk about the ways and the things that I've learned or the things that I'm going to do different as a mother, she received it as judgment. And I'm like, I'm not saying you were bad. I know you did your best. I know you gave me your best. But also, she had me at 21. She was still in school. She was a single mother. You know what I mean? Like, even between me and my sister being 10 years apart, she got a better mother because she was older, established. Her career was together. She had money. She had a house, all of the things. Whereas with me, she was figuring it out. She was 21. She was still trying to figure it out. And so when I had my daughter at almost 30, I'm in a different position automatically. And on top of that, I'm further along educationally, career-wise, financially, and things like that. So I'm able to give my daughter better. But I think a lot of the times when we try to talk about doing better than our mothers, there's that judgment that you didn't do good enough. And they gave their best, and that's hurtful. To feel like I gave you my best and it wasn't good enough. And that's a hard reality to sit in for the daughter and the mother, right? That's a really difficult reality to sit in, but we have to, in order to actually find healing. We have to have those conversations, and we have to feel comfortable to have those conversations so that we can actually move forward in a productive way and not have this. I feel like in the Black community, it's so common to have this toxic mother-daughter relationship. And it's got to stop. It's got to stop.
There's a lot to unpack there. And, one of the things I didn't understand initially is until I began to kind of read, and I really stumbled upon these words. And for some women, in this case a lot, so much of their identity, so much of their self-worth, so much as their way of thinking comes from that original place. So to be different or to be in conflict with that just causes some form of grief. And some of the descriptors that I saw to describe that conflict was comparison, shame, guilt, sabotage. Now, who's ever seen that show up a lot in relationships? Comparison, shame, guilt, sabotage. And beginning to realize that, and I like the way you describe it here. It needs to stop, and it's hard. right?
Yes.
But having a conversation allows us to unpack it. It's emotional, it's heavy. And thank you for Dr. Shawn for being here. I'm just read a few more chats before we wrap up. Let's see here. This is from Jai. I didn't realize that I was seeking approval from my mother until after she was gone. The road to healing was so many of my challenges that I had laid the path of my identity, through my mom. Thanks for sharing that, Jai. Mo, she says, yes, I'm triggered at times when spending time with my mother. She says, my stomach feels like a roaring lion. Ooh, they got that in the Bible. Is it possible to have a good and unhealthy relationship with the same person? Ooh, I like that question. Anything you want to say about that, Dr. Shawn? Is it possible for both to be true?
What I would call that is an internal conflict, because I wouldn't necessarily say it's good. There are some things that work, and there are some things that don't work, and I will refer to that to more as an internal conflict. And for me, my thing is to help you reduce that conflict as much as possible, and even eliminate it, because healing is possible.
I love it. I love it. Well, we've had some great conversation tonight with Tiara. Go ahead, Tiara.
Yeah, I was just looking through the comments, and I see Dr. Rhonda's comment about honor your mother and father and how that plays into the conversation. Can I just really quickly, it popped up in my spirit.
Go ahead, girl.
To me, how that plays into the conversation, right? I honor and obey are not the same thing. As an adult who pays her own bills, come on, somebody, I no longer feel the need as an adult to obey my mother. Honoring my mother means I show love, I show care, I show respect for, I, protect within my ability. And I actually had a conversation with my child's father. I'm like, that's still my mother. You're not going to disrespect her. To me, that's honoring my mother. When I have questions, I go to her for her advice, but that is her opinion. I do not feel obligated to do what she says I should do. I take her advice under advisement, consideration, and then I make the decision for myself. I think what the challenge is, particularly in our community, even into adulthood, there's this expectation of obedience. And that's where we struggle, because honor and obedience and obey are two different things. If you are a child, you obey. If you are an adult, you give honor to. And that's just a reverence for. It's not, I do what you tell me to do.
Awesome. I think you just did, Kiara, is gave a foreshadow to part 2. I can always tell when we're going to have a part 2 of the conversation. And I've been looking for a speaker, and I tell you what the topic is, part 2. During this show, as I wrap up, we've talked about the challenges of the relationship between mother and a daughter. And as you can tell, it's a deep topic. Mm-hmm. And I could see as Dr. Shawn was speaking, she's like, whoa, that's a whole bunny trail right there. We ain't gonna never get back, right? So we tried to stay at the level without being here for 3 or 4 hours. But we tried to stay on if you have a decent relationship, if your mother is decently on a healthy mental health side, if there's still some pain or cognitive dissonance, then how do we navigate that and begin to understand that this thing can affect you? When I've been thinking about part 2, I've been to think about what does it mean when mother was 15, 14 years old and she didn't get a chance to mature before she became mom. Or between emotional development, mom, some kind of way would be considered a narcissistic mom, a manipulative, controlling mom. as Tiara begins to foreshadow, like, what do you do?
Or moms that have addictions.
Yes.
That's a tough one for some people.
The codependence, the addiction and things like that. It's a heavy topic. I think we're going to need a panel for that one because that's a big topic. But I want to say thank you to Dr. Shawn for being here. And Tamika, if you don't mind dropping in chat again, that research, because I love that research. I'm telling you guys the importance of research. If you haven't discovered it, here in Southern Soul, we talk about things other people don't talk about. When it comes to our hair, the moisture, the conditioning, when it comes to our heart and our matters, which you begin to realize that if we don't understand these things better, nobody's going to do it for us. If we don't research and conduct how our hair and respectability politics affect our emotional health, and emotional health is no different than, you get a cold and that's your germ virus health. Emotional mental health is no different than that. I would like to normalize mental health as being no different than having a cold.
Yeah. You
get a cold, you're kind of down and out for a little while and you nurse yourself back. Mental health can be similar. Or your mental health can get bad and you can keep that cold for 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Here at Southern Soul, I would like to say we may get a cold, a little low on mental health for a few weeks, but we come on back like a good cold. And I want to say thank you, Tiara, for being here and sharing your story, for continuing to be transparent. You'll fit in very well with my family because we say whatever's on our mind. And good Lord, people be like,
I love that for you.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So perfect example. First story, we go to the cookout and they look at my cousin. He the one with all the kids. Like, boy, must you bring all your baby mamas to the cookout? Yes, they just everything. And he be like, oh, well, families that talk and families that don't. But I just want to say thank y'all. Up next, we got my brother K Boogie. What K Boogie at, man? Wait a minute. Did we get K Boogie off the thing? We may have. Let me see. Tamika, did we get K Boogie? Let me see if I can get him shared.
Yeah, he wasn't co-host.
Yeah, all right. I got K Boogie. K Boogie, talk to me. Let's see if we can get him up and going. We've been talking. Let me wrap up while K Boogie is getting going. Let me show you guys Southern Soul. Everything we do here tonight is through volunteerism, through people like yourself, people like Dr. Shawn, who essentially do the work, but they do it for different reasons. They do it because they have somewhat of a soul passion, somewhat of a calling, somewhat of a purpose. As you can see, as Tiara would speak, is just so strong to her that she has to begin to help others. As she began to share in her story, she says, the first time I helped that person at church, I began to feel good about my story. That is important when it comes to mental health. Because if you're feeling bad about your story, which is your story that you live with for the rest of your life forever, then that ain't a good story. But I love the moment where she talked about how she began to feel good. And she began to use that to help other people.
Thank you for joining us at Southern Soul Livestream Talk Show. Join us weekly at soullivestream.com. If you're joining us live, we'll take a quick music break and then come back for discussion with the audience.